The leather-clad stranger stood at the entrance of Lincoln Elementary School, his weathered hands gripping a crumpled flyer. And when 12-year-old Emma locked eyes with him through the chain-link fence during recess, neither of them knew that a single sentence, "Pretend I'm your father," would change both their lives forever. But in that moment, something unspoken passed between a girl who had lost everything and a man who thought he had nothing left to give. Emma had been standing alone by the fence for weeks now, ever since her dad died in a construction accident 6 months ago, watching the other kids play while she traced patterns in the dirt with her worn sneakers, her mom working double shifts at the diner just to keep their small apartment, and the upcoming father-daughter dance announced on the bright yellow flyer had become a source of quiet dread that sat heavy in her chest like a stone. The man's name was Jack Morrison, 52 years old, a former member of a motorcycle club who had spent decades on the road before a near-fatal accident and the loss of his own daughter to estrangement had forced him to reevaluate everything. And now he worked as a mechanic in this small Colorado town, living quietly in a trailer behind the shop, trying to outrun memories that followed him like shadows. He hadn't meant to pick up the flyer, had been taped to the community board at the grocery store, and a gust of wind had torn it free, sending it tumbling across the parking lot until it stuck to his boot, and when he bent to peel it away, the words, "Father-daughter dance, all dads welcome, make memories that last forever," felt like a knife between his ribs, because his own daughter, Melissa, was 30 now and hadn't spoken to him in 12 years. Not since he'd missed her high school graduation for a club rally, choosing brotherhood over blood in a decision that haunted him every single day. Something made him keep that flyer though, folding it carefully and tucking it into his jacket pocket. And that same inexplicable pull brought him to the school fence 3 days later during afternoon recess, where he stood awkwardly, a mountain of a man with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, tattoos creeping up his neck, and eyes that had seen too much, but still held a flicker of something gentle, something searching. Emma noticed him because everyone noticed him. Mothers picking up their children whispered and pulled their kids closer. Teachers exchanged concerned glances, but Emma saw something different. She saw the way he looked at the playground like he was remembering something precious and lost. The way his expression softened when a little girl ran past laughing, and when their eyes met. She didn't see someone scary, she saw someone sad, someone who understood what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. Jack didn't approach that day, or the next, but he came back each afternoon, and Emma found herself drifting closer to the fence. And on the third day, she finally spoke, her voice small but curious. "Why do you keep coming here?" And Jack, startled by the directness, cleared his throat and said honestly, "I don't really know, kid. Maybe I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with this." And he pulled out the wrinkled flyer. Emma's face changed when she saw it, a flash of pain crossing her features, before she looked away, and Jack, who had spent years reading people in roadside bars and rally camps, recognized that hurt immediately and said gently, "You got something against dances?" And Emma shrugged, kicking at the fence post, before whispering, "My dad died, so I can't go anyway." And the words hung in the air between them, heavy with shared loss. Jack felt something crack open in his chest, and before he could think better of it, he heard himself say, "What if you didn't have to miss it?" And Emma looked up, confused, and Jack continued, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept buried. "What if someone went with you? As your dad, I mean, just for the night, just so you could go." The suggestion was so unexpected, so impossibly kind from this intimidating stranger, that Emma actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, and said, "You don't even know me. Why would you do that?" And Jack was quiet for a long moment before answering with complete honesty, "Because I have a daughter I'll never get to dance with again, and you have a dance with no one to take you, and maybe sometimes broken things can help other broken things, even if just for one night." Emma stared at him. This rough-looking man with motorcycle boots and scars on his knuckles, offering something so tender it almost hurt. And she said cautiously, "My mom would never say yes. She doesn't even know you. You look like—" She trailed off, embarrassed, but Jack smiled sadly and finished, "Like trouble. I know. But what if we did this right? What if I met her, explained, let her decide? No pressure, no weirdness. Just one dad who messed up trying to help one kid who deserves better than missing out." That evening, Jack found himself sitting in the small apartment above the Sunrise Diner, across from Emma's mother, Claire, a tired woman in her late 30s, with kind eyes and suspicion written across every line of her body. And he told her the truth about his past, about his daughter, about seeing Emma by the fence and recognizing the particular loneliness of loss, about wanting to do one thing right, even if he'd done so many things wrong. Claire listened, her arms crossed, and when he finished, she said bluntly, "Give me one good reason I should let a stranger take my daughter to a school dance." And Jack nodded, expecting this, and pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo he rarely looked at because it hurt too much. A picture of him and Melissa when she was 7, both of them covered in ice cream, laughing at a county fair. And he said quietly, "Because I know exactly how precious what you have is, and I know exactly what it costs to lose it, and I would never, ever do anything to harm someone's kid when I'd give anything to have one more day with mine." Claire studied him for a long time, this weathered man with tears in his eyes over a daughter who wouldn't speak to him, and she saw something authentic in his pain, something that matched her own grief over the husband she'd lost. And finally, she said, "You hurt her, and I don't care what you've done in your past. I will make sure you regret it." And Jack nodded solemnly and replied, "You'd have every right." Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. Jack didn't just show up for the dance. He showed up for Emma, stopping by after school to help her with her bike's flat tire, teaching her how to use tools properly, sitting with her and Claire at the diner for quiet dinners, where they talked about everything and nothing. And slowly, carefully, a friendship formed built on mutual understanding of loss and the courage to try again. Emma learned that Jack had spent 30 years running from responsibility, that he'd lost his wife to divorce and his daughter to his own selfishness, that the motorcycle club had been his family until he realized too late that he'd traded real connection for the illusion of brotherhood, and that he'd spent the last 5 years trying to become someone worthy of forgiveness even if it never came. Jack learned that Emma was smart and funny, that she loved astronomy and wanted to be an engineer like her dad had been, that she sometimes woke up crying because she couldn't remember what her father's voice sounded like anymore, and that she was terrified of forgetting him completely. And in those conversations, Jack began to understand that being a father wasn't about biology or perfection. It was about showing up, listening, and loving someone enough to put their needs above your own ego. The night of the father-daughter dance arrived, with spring rain drumming against windows, and Jack showed up at their apartment in clean jeans, a pressed button-down shirt, his hair neatly trimmed, his tattoos covered, looking more nervous than Emma had ever seen him. And when Emma emerged in a simple blue dress that had been her mother's, her hair curled carefully, Jack's eyes filled with tears, and he said hoarsely, "You look beautiful, kiddo. Your dad would be so proud." And Emma smiled, suddenly shy, and whispered, "Thank you for doing this." At the school gymnasium, decorated with streamers and twinkling lights, Emma hesitated at the entrance, and Jack bent down to her level and said gently, "Here's the thing, Emma. Tonight, if anyone asks, you can pretend I'm your father. But I want you to know something important. You don't have to pretend your real dad isn't still with you. He is. He's in every smart thing you say, every kind thing you do, every dream you chase. I'm just the stand-in. He's the real deal. Okay?" Emma nodded, her throat tight, and together they walked in. The evening unfolded like a dream. They ate cookies and punch, Jack embarrassed himself trying to do the chicken dance while Emma laughed harder than she had in months. They made a picture frame together at the craft station, and when the slow song started, Jack offered his hand and said softly, "May I have this dance, miss?" And Emma took it, and as they swayed to the music, Jack told her stories about his own childhood, about his father who had been a good man, a teacher, someone Jack had disappointed by choosing the wrong path. And Emma listened and said quietly, "It's not too late, you know, to be good. You're being good right now." Those words hit Jack like a physical force, and he had to blink back tears as he replied, "You're pretty wise for 12, you know that." And Emma smiled and said, "My dad always said that. He'd say, 'Emma, you've got an old soul.'" And Jack responded, he was right. The dance ended with a father-daughter dedication ceremony where each pair was invited to share what they loved about each other. And when the microphone came to them, Emma surprised Jack by taking it and saying, her voice shaking but determined, "This is Jack. He's not my biological dad. My real dad, David Martinez, died 6 months ago, and I miss him every single day. But Jack showed me something important, that love isn't just about who you're related to, it's about who shows up." Jack showed up. He didn't have to. He doesn't get anything from it, but he wanted me to have this memory. And because of him, I got to be here tonight. And I got to feel like maybe it's okay to let new people in, even when you've lost someone. Because my dad would want me to be happy, and tonight, I am. The gymnasium erupted in applause, parents wiping their eyes, and Jack stood there, completely undone. And when Emma handed him the microphone, he took it with shaking hands and said simply, "I spent most of my life being selfish. I lost my own daughter because I didn't understand that being a dad was the greatest privilege I'd ever been given. Emma gave me a gift I didn't deserve a second chance to get it right, even if just for one night. So thank you, Emma. You reminded me what matters." As they drove home, in Jack's old pickup truck, the rain had stopped, and stars scattered across the clear sky, and Emma asked, "Jack, would you maybe want to keep hanging out? Like, not just tonight, but other times too?" And Jack, his voice thick, replied, "I'd like that more than you know, kiddo, if your mom's okay with it." Claire was waiting when they arrived, and Emma ran to her, talking a mile a minute about the dance. And Claire looked over her daughter's head at Jack, mouthing thank you, and Jack nodded, feeling something he hadn't felt in over a decade: purpose, connection, hope. In the weeks that followed, Jack became a fixture in their lives, helping with homework, fixing things around the apartment, showing up for Emma's science fair, and slowly, he began to build the kind of life he'd always been too afraid or too proud to build before. One evening, 3 months after the dance, Jack sat with Emma on the apartment building's roof, the two of them looking through her telescope at the stars, and Emma said thoughtfully, "You should try calling your daughter again." And Jack sighed and said, "She won't answer." "I've tried. I don't blame her." But Emma persisted, "But you're different now. You changed. Maybe she needs to see that." That night, Jack sat in his trailer and wrote a letter, pouring everything into it: his regrets, his transformation, his understanding of what he'd lost, his respect for her boundaries, and his eternal love. And he sent it with no expectation of response, simply because it was the right thing to do. 6 weeks later, a response came, brief but seismic. "Dad, I got your letter. I'm not ready for much, but maybe we could talk on the phone sometime. I'm glad you're doing better, Melissa." Jack called Emma immediately, his voice breaking with joy, and Emma cheered and said, "See? Good things happen to good people." And Jack corrected gently, "Good things happen when broken people try to heal and help others heal too." The story could have ended there, but life isn't neat, and healing isn't linear. Jack and Melissa talked once a month. Awkward conversations that slowly grew warmer, and Jack continued to be there for Emma as she navigated middle school and grief and Claire found herself healing too, her heart softening toward the possibility of joy again, and together, this unlikely little family built something beautiful from broken pieces. A year after the dance, Emma asked Jack to come to the cemetery with her, something she'd never invited anyone but her mother to do. And as they stood before David Martinez's headstone, Emma said, "Dad, this is Jack. He's been taking care of me and Mom. I thought you should meet him, kind of." And Jack, tears streaming down his weathered face, said to the stone, "I'll never replace you, David, but I promise I'll honor you by looking after these two amazing people you left behind. Thank you for raising such an incredible daughter." And Emma took his hand, and in that moment, Jack understood that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something meaningful in the present. 2 years after that first dance, Melissa came to visit, nervous and uncertain, and she met Emma and Claire, and she saw the man her father had become. And over coffee in that small apartment, she said quietly, "I spent so long being angry at who you were that I didn't give you a chance to show me who you'd become. I'm sorry it took me so long." And Jack, overwhelmed, replied, "Don't apologize. You had every right to your anger. I'm just grateful for this moment, right now." And Emma, watching this reunion, smiled and whispered to Claire, "Broken things, helping broken things." And Claire squeezed her hand and nodded. The father-daughter dance became an annual tradition, and each year Jack took Emma, and they honored the memory of the father she'd lost while celebrating the bond they'd built. And eventually Melissa joined them one year, traveling from across the country to participate, and the three of them, Jack, Emma, and Melissa, posed for a photo that Jack kept on his dashboard. A reminder that family isn't always about blood. It's about choice, commitment, and showing up, even when it's hard. On Emma's 18th birthday, as she prepared to leave for college on a full scholarship for engineering, she gave Jack a gift, a photo album chronicling the 6 years since that first dance, filled with pictures of science fairs, camping trips, graduation ceremonies, and quiet dinners. And on the first page, she'd written, "To Jack, you told me to pretend you were my father. But the truth is, I stopped pretending years ago. You showed me that families can grow in the cracks of grief, that second chances are real, and that showing up is the greatest form of love. Thank you for teaching me that it's okay to hold space for both loss and joy. For both the father I lost and the father figure I found. You didn't replace my dad, you honored him by being exactly what I needed. Love always, Emma." Jack read those words in his truck, parked outside the university where he'd just helped Emma move into her dorm, and he wept like he hadn't wept in decades, releasing years of pain and regret, and finally, allowing himself to feel worthy of the love he'd been given. And when he composed himself and looked up at the building where Emma was starting her new life, he thought about that crumpled flyer, that fence line conversation, that terrified decision to offer help to a grieving child. And he understood that sometimes the smallest acts of courage, choosing to show up, choosing to care, choosing to try again, create ripples that transform everything. And that the question isn't whether we're worthy of redemption, but whether we're brave enough to accept it when it's offered, and whether we're willing to become the person someone else needs, even when we don't feel like we deserve the chance. Because in the end, healing isn't a solo journey. It's something we do together. Broken pieces, finding other broken pieces, and building something stronger than what was lost. Something like hope, something like family, something like love.